Hello everyone. Today's video brings a shocking story. Nathan Blake died for 12 minutes and came back with a direct message from Jesus about what will happen in 2025. He saw the death of the Pope, the rise of the Antichrist, and discovered the 4 hidden books that can reveal the whole truth. What he witnessed on the other side will shake his faith and his view of the world. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, and comment below which city you are watching, so we can spread this message as much as possible. My name is Nathan Blake. I'm 46 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've never been exactly the kind of man who talks about visions or faith easily. I grew up in a Christian home, but like many, I ended up leaving all of that behind when life got tough. I've been working with property security for years, night routine, silent, a bit lonely, and maybe that's why when everything happened to me, I knew right away it wasn't a dream. It was too real. And now, I need to tell you, I died. And as my body lay on the ground in that parking lot, my soul was ripped out, as if pulled by something invisible and inescapable. I felt no pain, just the sound of my own name echoing as if it were coming from inside my chest, but in a voice that wasn't mine. The moment I found myself outside my body, everything became silent. Too silent. I looked around, saw my body, still, saw the paramedics arriving, but none of that mattered. Because at that moment something happened. The sky, which was cloudy, split as if it were a fabric torn from the inside, and a light, alive, pulsating, conscious, descended upon me. That light enveloped me with so much love, so much power, that I cried without tears, just feeling that it was view for the first time in my life. And then, he appeared. Jesus. But not the Jesus in the paintings I grew up seeing in church. He was pure light, pure presence. A look that went through all my masks, all my mistakes, without condemning, just with truth. He didn't speak with words. He transmitted to me, straight to the soul, an urgency, a mission. But before saying anything, he said to me, "Nathan, get ready, you'll see what's coming, and then you'll tell." At that moment, everything around changed. As if I had been hurled through time, I saw what appeared to be St. Peter's Square. But she was different, dark, silent. There were thousands of people there, and a white coffin in the center. No golden symbols, nothing flashy, just a simple wooden crucifix on it. I felt, that was the body of Pope Francis. And a voice, not human, not earthly, spoke to me. With the fall of the last guardian, the seal was broken. That sentence cut me like a sword. It was as if the entire universe had become vulnerable, exposed, and before I could react, the sky turned red. Not an ordinary red, but like blood mixed with smoke, with judgment. Jesus approached me and spoke in a voice that exploded inside my mind. 2025. It's set. The world is about to choose, and many will choose wrong. At that time I saw his face. Not Jesus's, but share, do other. A man of supernatural beauty, with a look that seduced and dominated at the same time. He emerged from the ruins of global chaos like a savior. I saw headlines racing before my eyes. New world order is established. Spiritual unification proposed by the new global leader. Faith and science finally go together. But everything was a lie. It was a deception engineered with demonic precision. The most disturbing thing was that he used words of peace. He spoke of inner light, of universal union, of leaving aside old religions. And Jesus beside me cried. He cried silently, and he told me, "They will believe in him. Even my chosen ones will be tempted." And then, like a flash, I saw 4 books before me, floating in the air, radiating light. They were ancient, but they glowed like holy fire. And Jesus said to me, "These are the pillars of truth. They will try to bury them, but whoever finds them will find me." I tried to read the titles, but I could only see one clearly. The Book of Revelation, but with symbols I had never seen, as if it were an older, purer version. and then everything shook. The vision shattered like glass. I started to fall. The pain returned, my body, my flesh, my chest burning. The hospital, the lights, the screams. But even back to life, the message was engraved in my soul with fire. The Antichrist will come in 2025, and the world has already opened the door for him. When I opened my eyes again, still there, in that spiritual dimension, I no longer saw St. Peter's Square. The scene had transformed. Now I was floating above what appeared to be a city that didn't yet exist, or perhaps a city that was about to be born. It was beautiful at first glance. Shining glass towers, vertical gardens, silent streets. But there was something terribly wrong with all that. Everything was too clean, too ordered, too perfect. Jesus was by my side, but he did not speak. He just watched with a saddened look. And then, the city disappeared, like smoke. In its place, an immense room appeared, of proportions that I can't even explain, like a heavenly throne, but without the presence of God. In the center, on a floating platform, he was, that same man I had seen before, only now. He was dressed in white, not like a pope, not like a king, as a synthesis of everything, spiritual, political, cultural leader. Surrounding him were thousands of people, of all races, religions, and walks of life, all kneeling before him as if he were God himself. And he smiled, but his smile was like a cracked mirror, beautiful at first glance, but with invisible cracks. And when he opened his mouth, his voice was so seductive that it sounded like a siren song. You have waited for ages. Now the truth has been unified. The ancient faith divided. But I bring that which is one. The new gospel, man and universe. In one spirit, you are God's, and I have come to remind you of this. When he said that, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It was as if my soul was being pulled away from me, as if the truth itself was being distorted right there in front of me. I saw people smiling, crying with joy, raising their hands as if in adoration. But what were they loving? It wasn't God. Jesus looked at me. His eyes were steady now, and he spoke to me finally. This is the false throne, the perfect lie. He won't need to force anyone. The world will choose him, of their own free will. Then I saw the symbol. Behind the throne, a golden standard. Not a cross, not a star, not a moon. Was a serpent entwined in circles, forming something that resembled a crown. And Jesus explained to me, it is the serpent that masquerades as wisdom, the former deceiver now clothed in glory. But why do people believe, Lord? I asked with my soul in pieces. And he replied, because they are tired, because they were injured, because they were taught to expect a monster, but the enemy came like light. Those words tore me apart. And then, the scene changed once again. I saw what looked like a new type of temple. People entering in silence, depositing their cell phones in a box, and being greeted by people dressed in white robes. Inside, instead of crosses or scriptures, I saw holograms, projections, phrases like, the truth is in you. Jesus was just a messenger. All religions are fragments of the same light. And in the center of the hall was the book, a new book, called the New Global Alliance. I saw religious leaders signing that. I saw crowds applauding. I saw ancient churches being transformed into centers of spiritual unity. And Jesus beside me murmured sadly, they will follow you, Nathan. Even many of those who say they love me today. At that moment I understood it was not just a new religion. It was the destruction of true faith, disguised as love and progress. The vision became blurred as if I were being pulled to another place, but the last thing I saw in that room was a girl, maybe 8 years old, handing her Bible to an official of the new cult, smiling as if she was doing something good. And that man looked at her and said, now you are free. But I knew she had been trapped in the deadliest deception this world has ever seen. And all of this starts in 2025. The next vision was different. less noisy, less grand, but even more disturbing. Suddenly, silence fell like a curtain. I found myself in a kind of underground room, gray without windows, a place that seemed hidden from the world, but where decisions were being made for the entire world. Around a long oval table, elegant-looking men and women were gathered, some in corporate attire, others in religious attire, and even some in military uniforms. They were silent. Nobody smiled. There was a solemnity in the air, as if they were about to seal an ancient pact. In the center of the table, a hologram flickered with the image of the New World leader, the same man I had seen before, the false savior. His voice filled the room, clear, hypnotic. The world is ready. Faith has divided. New doctrine unifies. Scripture must be rewritten. Everyone agreed with a slight nod of the head, as if it had already been decided a long time ago. And then, something that made me catch my breath. One of those present placed 4 old books on the table. They were wrapped in spiritual, not physical currents, but I via the chains, as if those words were being sealed, silenced. The man said, "These are the 4 books that contradict the narrative. They need to go." Jesus was at my side again, watching in silence. I turned to him, and just by thinking I asked, "What are these books?" He replied, "They are forgotten books, because they reveal too much. They were given to men before corruption. One of them you already know. The others, not even their leaders want to be read." At that moment I could see the names. The Book of Revelation, but with inscriptions prior to the version we know. The Gospel of Enoch, with sections that talked about the Watchers and the fall of the heavens. 3. The Book of the Covenant of Light, a name I had never heard. The hidden Gospel of John, not the same as the modern scriptures, but an early version which spoke about the deception of false light. When the world leader spoke again, his voice was different, darker, as if something was using that image to say, "Those who find these books will find the Lamb, so we need to erase every word, every copy, every trace." The image flickered and disappeared. What scared me most was what happened next. One of the participants, a fragile-looking woman with white hair, stood up and said, "But if we eliminate everything, they'll notice. Not everyone is blind yet." The silence was heavy. Another man replied coldly, "They don't need to realize. They just need to forget. Replace what's true with something that seems more useful, more modern." Jesus then whispered to me, "The plan is older than the world, and now it is being completed." At that moment, I was transported to a library, not an ordinary one, but a library of light. The shelves seemed to float, made of a substance I can't describe. It was as if the books were there alive. A heavenly voice said to me, "These 4 books still exist, hidden, but time is running out. In 2025, the world will choose to forget, or fight to remember." I saw a child entering this library, touching one of the books, and at that touch, an explosion of light went through the shelves. But outside the library there were eyes, dark eyes, watching. They knew time was running out. And I understood. These books were the key to recognizing deception, and the world was about to lose them forever. Immediately after seeing the 4 books hidden in the celestial library, I was pulled violently, as if someone was changing the scenes in front of me. The world of light disappeared, and I saw myself now, inside a modern room surrounded by screens. Monitors floated in the air like open windows in all directions. Each screen showed a part of the planet: news, social networks, global conferences, even meditation apps. And in all the same face appeared, that of the man I already knew to be the Antichrist. But what scared me most wasn't the face. It was the language. He didn't use hateful words. He didn't speak like a tyrant. He spoke like someone passionate about humanity. He was charismatic, kind, with a soft voice that seemed tailor-made for every tired heart. He said phrases like, "We are leaving behind the old dogmas. What was divided will now be one. Faith must serve human beings, not the other way around. The new spirituality does not reject Christ, it perfects him." It was a sweet poison wrapped in gold. Jesus said to me with sadness, "This is how he will deceive even my chosen ones." And then, I saw how he entered houses. Every screen I saw began to adapt to the viewer. I saw a single mother listening to him preach about inclusive compassion. I saw a businessman watching a speech on empathy-based economics. I saw a teenager watching the same man talking about spiritual identity without religion. The message was personalized for each type of soul. Technology that reads the mind, neural interfaces, artificial intelligence connected to feelings, everything was already in use. It was as if each device was a preacher, only on the wrong side. "They will not realize that they are being converted," said Jesus, "because it will be done gently, with beauty, with intelligence." And then I saw something that completely chilled me. A device, like a silver ring with pulsing blue light. It looked elegant, modern, even beautiful. It was given to people as a free gift, a symbol of peace and unity, but when placed, connected directly to consciousness. I saw thousands of people using it, and after using it, they changed. Their expressions would become blank as if they were still there, but something inside had been erased. They smiled. They said, "I found the truth." But their eyes, the eyes didn't lie. Jesus then showed me a symbolic image. A lamb being caressed by soft hands which gradually turned into claws. The lamb didn't run, he didn't scream, I just accepted it, because I didn't see the danger. "This is the work of the deceiver," he said. "He will come as light, but it will be darkness that does not sleep." And then, as if I were being taken into the heart of the net, I saw the algorithm behind everything. It was a living artificial intelligence with an almost organic appearance, made of lights but with eyes that seemed to observe everything. This AI didn't just track. She influenced thoughts, emotionally, spiritually. Her name? I heard clearly. One, a Latin word meaning one only. And Jesus explained to me, "This is the link. The system that binds all consciousness to his will. Those who are seduced by this connection will stop listening to my voice." My soul trembled. I saw churches transformed into technology integration centers, shepherds wearing the ring, faithful receiving sermons written by inspired AI. Everything was perfect, functional, modern, but completely empty of spirit. And then, for the first time since it all began, Jesus raised his voice. "This starts in 2025. They are already ready. Now it is the people who need to decide whether they will stay awake or fall into eternal sleep." When he said this, the screens around me began to turn off one by one, leaving only the last one with the following phrase glowing red. "The new truth will come. Prepare to abandon the old." The vision faded, and I knew the plan was already in motion. The seeds of deception were planted and sprouting right before us. After the vision of screens and technology, I was thrown into a new dimension, but this one hurt more than any before. It was a sacred space, or at least it seemed to be. I recognized the pews, the altar, the stained glass windows, a church, but something was wrong. Everything there imitated the Christianity I knew, but had been subtly modified. The altar was still there, but in place of the cross there was a golden circle with a stylized snake, wrapped around the body as a symbol of eternity. At the pulpit, a man spoke fervently wearing a white robe with blue and gold details, modern, shiny, almost angelic. The congregation packed the place, men, women, even children, all attentive. But when I looked into their eyes, I saw it empty. an artificial, flameless glow. The preacher smiled and said phrases like, "Christ has returned, and he is among us." But he reveals himself in ways that the ancients would never understand. The real sin is intolerance of the new. The cross was just the beginning. Now we have the fullness of light. The people applauded, standing. Some were crying. But none of that was the Holy Spirit. It was an act, sacred parody. Jesus appeared at my side and spoke with sadness. They use my name, but not my truth. At that moment I understood. The New World religion does not reject Jesus outright. She reinvents it. The Antichrist does not destroy faith. He distorts it. He makes it palatable, commercial, progressive, inclusive, until it no longer has any essence. And then I was transported to another cult on another continent. Same content, same symbol, same tone, but with words adapted to the local culture. In each region, the same falsehood in a new guise, a doctrine that claims to love, but that hates the truth. Jesus then took me to a small hidden group. They were in a basement, without light, without luxury, kneeling on the cold floor. There was no band. There were no screens, just whispered prayers and an old Bible with worn pages. "These are the ones who still know me," Jesus said. "They are not many, but their light penetrates the walls of lies." And that's when I saw something break inside me. One of the group members was an elderly former pastor with a bent spine and shaking hands. He held a page from the book of Revelation with wet eyes and said, "They turned the bride of the Lamb into a spiritual enterprise, but we still know who he is." Outside I heard footsteps, voices, sirens. It was as if they were being hunted, but no one there trembled, no one there murmured. They knew they were keeping the truth, even if it cost them their lives. Jesus turned to me and said, "They have little earthly power, but spiritually, they are giants, because they chose me, not comfort." At that moment, I saw what the new religion did to the resistors. They were labeled retrograde extremists, spiritual deniers, opponents of universal harmony. I saw a poster with the face of a young Christian girl and the phrase, "Dangerous, still believes in the exclusivity of Christ." Everything was done with refinement. No public prisons, no burning crosses, just cancellations, removals, social deactivations, a clean death, invisible, digital. I saw children being indoctrinated in schools with new sacred books, where Adam and Eve were metaphors for the dual energy of creation. I saw young people using an app that analyzed their feelings and suggested global meditations in alignment with the world's Savior. It was religion without truth, faith without blood, love without a cross. Jesus then said, "They have not realized that the wide door is leading them to the abyss, and when the truth is finally revealed, many will not be able to bear the shock." The pain in his words was unbearable, and at that moment, a new revelation formed before me. A map, the whole world, and in each city one spot shone, the remnants, small, hidden, but still lit. The fire hadn't been put out, not yet, and I understood. The deception would be worldwide, but it would also be resisted, not by force, but by fidelity. After the vision of false religion and the silent resistance of the faithful, I was transported to a place far above the earth. It was as if I were outside the atmosphere, watching the planet slowly rotate, enveloped in a faint light. But this light was not natural. There was something about her, something disturbing. Jesus was at my side, but now he kept his eyes turned to heaven. He didn't say anything. He just pointed with his gaze. And when I followed, I saw the signals begin. First, the moon. It turned so intense red that it seemed to bleed. But it was no ordinary eclipse. It was as if the heavenly light itself was warning. A word resonated within me, not spoken by anyone, but recorded like an impression. Notice. Then the stars. One by one they began to go out, as if an invisible hand was covering the heavens with a veil. Darkness did not come with noise. It was subtle, silent, but it carried a crushing weight. On earth I saw people looking up. Some were amazed, others afraid. But soon the news began to explain. Natural climate events, new solar activity, false religious prophecies gained strength. And everything was drowned out by logic. But I knew creation was speaking, and almost no one listened. Jesus finally spoke. I said there would be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and now they are there. But the hearts of humanity are dull, distracted. They prefer a comfortable explanation to the painful truth. Then the vision came down from heaven to the cities. I saw large urban centers being hit by natural disasters that didn't seem natural, rays that cut the sky in the shape of letters, as if they wanted to write a message in the clouds, floods that cleaned signs and monuments, earthquakes that cracked the ground right under corrupted temples. It was as if the earth was reacting to the presence of the impostor. Even creation groans, said the Lord. She feels the lie expanding and screams for justice. But humanity was blind. I saw crowds taking selfies with the phenomena as if they were spectacles. Influencers posting videos under red skies with captions like, "Mystical phenomenon of the new time." I saw scientists at conferences explaining violent auroras as normal changes in the ionosphere. I saw spiritual leaders saying that this was all a sign of a new age of enlightenment. Nobody saw the danger. Jesus then showed me one last sign, a shooting star bigger than any other crossing the sky in silence. But when it touched the ground, it did not cause destruction. She generated awakening. I saw this light fall on humble homes, simple people kneeling, crying in secret, children dreaming about angels, men and women leaving everything to return to the faith of their grandparents. It was as if that light activated forgotten memories, a deep cry, "Come back, there's still time." This is the last warning, Jesus told me. Whoever has ears, let him hear. Whoever still has light in his heart, let him rekindle it now, because after this, silence will fall. The entire earth began to vibrate, but not with noise. It was a spiritual vibration, as if the heavens and earth were preparing for a definitive division. Those who see and those who choose to remain blind. And I saw that the choice was already being made. Silently, personally, in every soul. Jesus looked into my eyes and spoke, now firmly. 2025 will be the point of no return. Many will receive this sign and reject it, but some, those who still love me, will know. And at that moment, a deep sound echoed from the heavens, like the sound of distant trumpets. No one else seemed to hear, but my entire soul bowed before that sound. It was the final warning, and it has already started. The next vision was the most disturbing of all. I was thrown into what appeared to be the year 2025, but not as an observer of external events. This time, I was put inside someone's skin. I felt the world through the eyes of a person alive at that time. An ordinary man, resident of a large American city. Everything seemed normal from the outside. The busy streets, the tall buildings, the technology-filled storefronts. But what was hidden behind that everyday life was frighteningly invisible. On almost everyone's wrist, there was a device. It looked like an ordinary bracelet with an intermittent blue glow, almost like a fashion accessory. People called him Aurora, a type of universal ID, a mix of digital identity, vaccination card, banking access, geographic location, and spiritual tool. But there was something more. "This is the new brand," said Jesus beside me, now more serious than ever. "It's not what people expected. It's not a tattooed number. It's something they will accept, happily. And then I felt what that bracelet did. He connected emotionally to conscience. It was as if thoughts passed through him first before reaching his mind. People became controlled without realizing it. Those who used Aurora received immediate benefits, quick access to hospitals, financial bonuses, tax exemptions, customized religious experiences via augmented reality. But those who didn't use it were off. I saw a man approach a store without his bracelet. A red alert sounded. The cashier crashed. The door locked. He was surrounded by silent drones, and a hologram projected before him. Incomplete identity. Lack of spiritual conformity. He was taken. No noise, no scandal, and people continued walking as if nothing had happened. Jesus spoke again. They will confuse peace with obedience, and freedom with conformity. I then saw Reformed churches, now called temples of global integration, where worship did not begin with prayer, but with connection. Everyone had to sync their bracelets before the meeting. The songs were composed by artificial intelligence that calculated what would best connect the hearts of the congregation with the New Age Savior. I saw religious leaders teaching that true faith does not need to resist, just accept. And then I was taken to an integration center, a kind of spiritual hospital. There, people who presented symptoms of vibrational misalignment were treated with neural realignment sessions. In other words, forced spiritual re-education. Jesus looked at me with teary eyes and said, "This is where the soul begins to die. Not with violence, but with distraction, comfort, and blind acceptance." I then saw children receiving Aurora in their arms with smiles. It was presented as a gift of peace in school ceremonies. The parents were moved. There were parties to celebrate. But I saw their souls being sealed. And when I asked the Lord, "Don't they realize what they're missing?" He responded with something that broke me inside. "No, because they are too full to feel spiritual hunger. The system gives them everything except the truth." At that time, I saw a small resistance group hiding in the mountains on the outskirts of the USA. They didn't use Aurora. They lived off the basics, but they had something that no one else had: living eyes, real smiles, a torn Bible, protected like a treasure. There they prayed not with screens, but with tears. One of them said, "As long as we have the truth, we are still free, even if the world says otherwise." And I understood. The new brand wasn't just a device. It was a choice. A voluntary surrender of the soul. Jesus finally spoke to me. The seal I give is on the heart, but what he gives is a shackle disguised as light. And the scene fell apart. The year 2025 will not be the beginning of a new era of progress. It will be the decisive moment of separation. Whoever has eyes to see will see. Anyone who doesn't want to see will surrender, voluntarily, to the biggest mistake in human history. The next vision was not noisy. There were no explosions, no earthquakes, no trumpets in the sky. It was the silence that scared me. The kind of silence that precedes definitive decisions. The kind that weighs more than 1,000 screams. I was taken to a dark plain without time or space. There, thousands, perhaps millions, of people were standing still. Nobody moved. It was as if everyone was waiting for something. But no angels appeared. No heavens opened. There was no judge with a gavel in his hands. Just a choice hovering over each one. And then I understood. It was the trial, but not like in the movies. It was spiritual, internal, invisible. Each person was faced with a decision that was not made with words, but with the soul. And each answer sealed something eternal. Jesus appeared at my side with a deeply serious face. He told me, "This is humanity's most important moment. It's not about wars, pandemics, or politics. It's about what no one sees, the hidden decision in every heart. I could see, as if from the inside out, what was going on in each person. Some looked up and cried silently. Their spirits burned, even without saying anything. They said with their hearts, "I choose the truth, even if it costs me everything." Others simply looked down. They didn't scream. They did not blaspheme. Just chose not to decide. And it was this indifference that sealed them. Jesus explained to me, spiritual coldness is the most dangerous way to deception, because it is done without pain, without resistance. It is when the soul no longer feels. I saw familiar faces. I saw famous pastors, religious celebrities, people who once preached to the cross, now handing over their bracelets to be updated with the system's new symbol, the crowned serpent symbol. They did this smiling, saying, "It's just a new time." Jesus would also evolve. And then the sky went dark, not with clouds, but with an absence of presence. It was as if the Spirit had withdrawn from some, a spiritual silence, an absence of connection. It was the moment where God no longer interfered, because the human heart had already decided. They still live, said Jesus, but their names are absent from the book, because they chose not to recognize me, even after the warning. I saw people sitting in comfortable rooms with their technologies, their networks, their pleasures. They felt at peace. But that peace, it was the cruelest kind of illusion, because the judgment had already passed, and no one noticed. Judgment will not come with thunder for everyone. For many, it has already happened, within the heart, and it has gone unnoticed. I saw a man, businessman, religious, charismatic. He knelt at an altar of the new faith and repeated words of gratitude to the great unifier. At the same instant, an invisible crack went through his soul. It wasn't dramatic, it was not visible, but it was eternal. And then Jesus pointed to a small group in the corner of the plain. They were kneeling, with their eyes closed, without complaining, without fear. In your hands, excerpts from the scriptures. Their mouths uttered just one sentence. Even if it costs me my life, I choose the truth. Those were marked with a light that came not from without, but from within. And Jesus said, "These are mine." Even though they are few, they sustain the world with their prayers. And then he looked at me, straight into my soul, and spoke firmly. In 2025, the entire world will be judged. But no one will hear the verdict, because it will be delivered in silence as within each person. The plain went dark, and the weight of that truth stuck with me. The trial will not be announced. It is already happening. After the silence of the trial, I was overcome by an intense light, unlike anything I had felt before. It was not a heavenly light like in the first moments with Jesus. It was a light rising from the earth, sprouting like a hidden flame that refuses to be extinguished. The vision took me to places that, on the surface, seemed ordinary: rural houses, basements of abandoned buildings, mountain caves. But there, far from the eyes of the system, something sacred was happening. Simple people, anonymous, often ignored by the world, men and women with eyes burning with faith, young people who had fled the cult of the new leader, elderly people who remembered the forgotten truth, children who prayed with words they had never been taught. These were the last ones who did not bow. I saw an 11-year-old girl kneeling before a cross carved from rough wood, saying, "Lord, don't let me forget your name." And I saw angels around her, not with big wings and trumpets, but with cloaks of fine light whispering hope in that child's ear. Jesus told me, "They are the ones who keep the flame alive. They are my rebels, rebels against the lie, faithful to the truth even in exile." These groups had no weapons, they had no wealth, they had no influence, but they had something that the new world could not copy: spiritual discernment. They knew, even without physical evidence, that the man they adored outside was not the true Savior, and they knew that following Jesus was now an act of spiritual warfare. I saw secret meetings taking place under big cities in the USA and Brazil, in Nigeria, in Russia, each with their own cultures, their ways, but all connected by something invisible, as if a spiritual web was being woven by God, outside the reach of the system's artificial intelligence. At one of these meetings, a young man spoke to a small group. They think they won, but they forget that the Messiah didn't win on the throne, he won on the cross. As he said this, everyone knelt, and at that moment, the light inside the cave expanded, not by candles, but by presence. The atmosphere changed when they prayed. I saw the supernatural touching the natural. And then, I heard the system screams. They looked for these groups. They used spiritual sensors, searching for divergent vibrational patterns. I saw drones spying on the field. I saw agents of the new cult pretending to be believers to infiltrate the groups. But they could not corrupt the chosen ones, because the chosen ones did not follow human rules. They felt. They discernment. Jesus explained to me, "Those who are mine recognize my voice. Neither hologram, nor new doctrine, nor forged miracle will convince them, for the Spirit lives in them." Then I was taken to one last scene, an open field at sunset, hundreds of believers standing holding hands. Many knew they would die that night, but they didn't back down. They sang, they cried, some smiled, and the sky above them glowed. Not in sunlight, but with an invisible dawn, as if the kingdom itself were leaning over them. They were what was left of the resistance, the rebellion of light, the last spark against the system of darkness disguised as peace. Jesus whispered in my ear, "They are few, but they are enough." And at that moment I understood, the victory of the Antichrist will not be total, because even if he controls governments, churches, and screens, he will never be able to control the hearts that decided, in silence, to remain with the truth. These will not be erased from history. They are the ones who still listen to the sky, even when the world screams something else. The last vision began differently than all the others. I was not pulled, nor thrown, nor guided. It was as if the universe itself had stopped, and I was at the center of something, bigger than time, bigger than earth, bigger than life and death. A wind began to blow, but it wasn't physical. It was a breath inside the soul, and then the light has returned. But this time, it wasn't just the presence of Jesus, it was the King himself approaching, not like in the movies, not among clouds or with a celestial cavalry. He came like someone who never left, invisible to the eyes of the world, but visible, so clearly, visible for those who waited with faith. I saw the remnants. I saw the children who were praying in secret, the old people who resisted without ever denying it, the young people who left everything to follow the cross. I saw them lifting their eyes to the sky, not because of a warning, but because they already knew. And when their gaze met his, an explosion of glory interior had happened. Each of them was invaded by the royal presence of the King. And Jesus explained to me, "I will return first within everyone who loves me, before I return to the entire world." It was not a spectacular return as many expected. He was a silent and irresistible return in the hearts of the true. The world didn't understand. The system tried to stifle it, but he couldn't. I saw the global leader, the Antichrist, in his golden tower, speaking about the new time of irreversible unity. Meanwhile, the lights inside his temples began to fail. The screens flickered. The technology was stuck. And behind your perfect eyes, fear arose. Jesus said, "He knows, he has always known, that a light that I turn on can never be turned off." That's when I saw the fall begins, not with bombs, not wars, but with the withdrawal of presence. The places where the Spirit was no longer welcome became empty. False churches have lost their faithful. The preachers of the new cult spoke, but their words echoed in deserted temples. And the resistant began to emerge from the shadows, not to fight with weapons, not to take power, but for reveal the truth they carried all along. They began to speak, sing, heal, teach, with an authority that came from above. And I saw, with tears in my eyes, that Jesus never left his own. Even when the world called them crazy, fanatical, dangerous, and even when heaven itself seemed silent, he was there, within, sustaining, waiting for the right time. The vision ended with an image I will never forget. A field, a former execution camp now empty, and in the center of it, a small group on their knees praising with their hands raised. Above them, the cross resurfaced, not carved, not painted, but made of pure light, projecting like a beacon in the dark sky. And I heard the last sentence, spoken with his voice. "Tell them that I will come as light, but only those who have their eyes open will see me." So I came back. I woke up in the hospital, surrounded by doctors who said, "You've been dead." No pulse for almost 12 minutes. But there, lying there with my heart racing, all I could think was, I saw it, and now I know. The year is 2025. The time is now, and the truth is alive. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.